Here we go. Yeah, so this is actually of general interest to the overall academic community. This has been accepted for briefing at Marcel Grossman. They're very interested in what we're doing. And so has Detlef Hoyer's work on the committee with five-dimensional Kaluza-Klein solutions to the Einstein field equations, extensions to the Einstein field equations. What we've been trying to do is look at possible general relativity solutions that could account for some of the behavior we're seeing in UAPs. So what we're doing is presenting broad categories of potential solutions for propulsion stemming from the use of general relativity or quantum mechanical effects that can change gravity. So the two broad categories I'm going to be covering here are the classical general relativity solutions and quantum mechanical solutions that can affect gravity. One of the ones I'm most familiar with, and the order this is really from what I'm familiar with to what I'm not at all familiar with. I've published a couple of times on forward coils. Robert Forward was a contemporary of mine at Hughes Aircraft Company. He researched gravity and lasers at Hughes Research Labs in Malibu. At the same time, I was down in El Segundo working for Hughes. One of the things he invented was the mass flow toroid, called a forward coil, that if you flow mass around up the center of a coil and down the outer edge, and you flow enough mass fast enough, you can get a frame dragging effect that's additive in the middle and subtractive on the outside. And so if you have a way to collect it in the middle and then, for instance, run it through a high index material, you can get a concentration of gravitational acceleration in the middle of this. And it can become, it's a DC device, it can become a thruster of sorts. Interesting aspects of this is it's very low EMI because the vast majority of the magnetic field is captured inside the body of the toroid. And so you don't see any EMI with this. So for instance, this would be a good candidate for the triangular shaped craft because one of the aspects is very low EMI. There is a lot of mass flow, and if you're pushing at relativistic speeds where the electrons, for instance, you might be flowing in nanowires, superconducting nanowires, might be getting near relativistic speeds, that could result in Bremsstrahlung radiation, which could be emitted down the middle of this thing. So you may actually see a glow coming out of the middle of these, which if you had one in each corner of a triangle, could certainly result in the same kind of signatures we see in the triangle craft. Another possibility is the use of gravitational waves. One way to make gravitational waves is a plasma quadrifold flow. This is using, for instance, a tokamak fusion reactor, the plasma of a tokamak fusion reactor, and modulating that plasma flow so that it results in a quadrupole moment. To make a gravitational wave, you need a third derivative of a quadrupole, and it goes as the square of that third derivative. So if you're mashing flow back and forth in a quadrupole manner, in modulating it in a plasma flow, that plasma flow will result in a gravitational wave. Now, a gravitational wave by itself is not useful for propulsion. You have to find a way to rectify it, to turn it into a DC kind of a field. And one way to do that is quadrupole rectification. What you do under this scenario is you squeeze it one way very quickly, and you release it very slowly in the opposite direction, so that on one axis it's very strong, on the other axis it's very weak. Since it goes as the square of the third derivative, that enhances the direction in one direction, and it minimizes in the other direction, and it creates a sort of nonlinear imbalanced force. And if you arrange, as you might see, it's hard to spot in the lower right, if you arrange a couple of these quadrupole flow generators, you can send negative going pulses to a forward reaction mass in the craft and positive going pulses to the aft reaction mass and have a forward momentum imparted. This would be a good candidate for something, for instance, if we observed a UAP with a SIGINT aircraft and the signal's intelligence showed a large EMI in the microwave field, not that that would ever happen, but a scenario like that would point to a kind of craft that may be using a gravitational wave propulsion like this. This was first predicted by Grishchuk and Sajin in Russia in the 70s, and I've published a couple times of it the last being at a high-frequency gravity wave conference in China in 2017. There are other ways to create gravitational waves. There's a way called the Gertzenstein effect, in which you pass an electromagnetic wave through a strong gravitational field, and it's a synchroresonance effect in general relativity that results in a gravitational wave being emitted. There's a couple different ways to do that. Boccialetti created another scheme using general relativity equations, where you can use either a static E field or B field. And so those are other ways to create gravitational waves. There are also other ways to rectify gravitational waves. There's, because of the nature, because of the stiffness of space-time, there is a researcher called Christodoulou. There's an effect after him called the Christodoulou effect that says if you pass a gravitational wave through a pair of test masses, there's a permanent displacement between those test masses after the waves compared with before the waves. And depending upon the orientation of those test masses, you have forward propelled in a relative way one of the test masses with respect to the other, thereby imparting a momentum in a relative sense. So this is another potential way to rectify gravitational waves. Another scheme is your classic warp drives. Alcubierre is the most common and the most well-known. That's pictured on the lower left. On the lower right is a more commonly used solution now, the Narita warp drive, and there are many. I have many references using the Narita warp drive here. It uses a lot less energy. It's a lot more efficient, and there are every day more warp drive solutions, including just this month. Drawn to my attention, thank you, Glenn Robertson, for drawing to my attention the Fuchs 2024 Fuchs paper. He's a local here at University of Alabama at Huntsville, and that was just put on archive on May 4th. So there's a new warp drive every day. It's fascinating to see how rapidly these solutions are evolving. Just to point out, before I go to the next slide, the difference between a warp drive and a wormhole. A warp drive, you'll notice, is still a surface. So it's topologically, it's an S0 surface. If we go to a wormhole, it's topologically an S1 surface. It means it has a donut hole. And so it has this throat that conjoins two different pieces of space-time. Both of these are static in the sense that they perpetuate in time. They're not instantaneous. They continue for a given amount of time. So long as you keep putting energy into them, they keep existing. The first solid general relativity wormhole solution I saw was Kip Thorne's along with Morris in '88. Matt Visser did one in '95. Eric Davis proposed one for inducing propulsion in '98. And there have been follow-ons to that. Traversable wormholes in 4D is the most common in 2022. So I will have a list of all of these references when I develop a companion paper for this for Marcel Grossman, the General Relativity Conference coming up in July. So a special solution for warp drives that Matt Visser had a lot of fun with a couple of years ago. He and his contemporaries put together a series of tractor beams, and you'll see the alien here with the cow. You can use a tractor beam to pull the cow towards the spaceship, or you can use a pressor beam to push him away, or a stressor beam to maybe slice and dice him and take a biological sample. So it all depends upon the relative location of where you put the push, the bulge, or the dip in space-time. If you're pushing the cow away, you put a dip in front of him. You put the surge in front of him. You put the dip in front of him if you want it attracted to you, and so on. So these are really special cases of warp drives. Now we switch gears. I've been talking about classical general relativity using Einstein's field equations. This is a very different beast. The problem with using classical relativity is when you look at the Einstein field equations, the coupling between mass and energy on one side and the warp you're going to get in space-time on the other side is g over c to the fifth. The c is the speed of light, and you take that to the fifth power and you put it in the denominator. That's terrible coupling. So how do we improve this coupling? One way to do that is quantum mechanically. And so in 1964, a pair of authors, Halperin and Laurent, looked at quantum transitions that could force a graviton to be emitted instead of a photon. Now, we haven't been looking for these emissions, so we haven't seen them, but you need the instrumentation in order to make the measurements, right? So one idea is have a parajunction, a solid state junction, that forces these graviton transitions. These are spin 2 transitions. Is there a way to stimulate those transitions with photons, with an electron flow that would normally activate photon flow, but have a junction, for instance, a type 1 to type 2 superconducting junction that disallows photon emission, but does allow graviton emission? That was Fontana's idea using the work of Halperin and Laurent, and he named it the Gazer for a gravitational laser, essentially. And he's published on this extensively. I believe it was in one of Glenn Robertson's books. He last published this notion. He's published it at STAFE, Space Technology Applications International Forum, and in other venues. He's described it at the high-frequency gravitational wave workshops that we've held with the Russians and Chinese. So he has published this on many different occasions. And the idea are these type 1 to type 2 Josephson junction kind of connections, which you'll see the transitions pictured on the left, and then the type of junction that could potentially be stimulated to emit these gravitons on the right. So we're categorizing this as a quantum mechanical gravitational emission. So that's our first quantum mechanical case study. And so this, for instance, would be another one where we might see, a lot of EMI, because to stimulate these emissions, there's going to be a lot of electron flow to stimulate this kind of graviton. More to the point, there are metamaterials that have a sub-index of 1, an index of refraction less than 1. And what does that do for you? That gives you, instead of a red shift, that gives you a blue shift, which could potentially be viewed as a repulsive gravity versus an attractive gravity. And why do we think this is important? Well, the two things that are important about it, number one, is you get propulsion out of this because you can manipulate your light cone. And so that's pictured in the middle. Manipulating your light cone is shaping the space-time, the way that space and time is interacting with your craft. You're shaping space-time around your craft due to the metamaterial skin of your craft. Jack Sarfati, a researcher that has been off and on engaged with government organizations to work the theoretical details of this out, will argue that this is the best possible explanation for the tic-tac propulsion. And why does he say that? It's because our sensors, when we look at a tic-tac, when we're looking at the infrared of a tic-tac, it looks cold, it looks dark. But when we visually see it, it looks like it's glowing white. So his theory is we're blue shifting black body radiation, which is what an infrared sensor would see. We're blue shifting that out of the infrared into the visible. And so that would account for the signature of these tic-tacs. And so this right now is a leading candidate for describing how tic-tacs operate. I want to be complete, so this is something I don't know anything about. So some of this stuff is a little bit taboo. So I would recommend that you take Julia Mossbridge's recommendation and break out the universal love and wrap yourself in that to protect yourself from any fear of some of these teleportation techniques. What's the difference between a teleportation and a wormhole? The difference is a wormhole and a warp drive are persistent. Teleportation events are, if not instantaneous, very rapid and very temporary. And so a teleportation scheme has been thought up with Morris and Thornigan and with Matt Visser. And Hal Puthoff looked also at this. It's vacuum-metric engineering. It's polarizing the vacuum by shrinking or growing how many vacuum states there are inside the vacuum. The most classic version of this is the Casimir effect, which points out that the two plates are being pushed together because we're reducing the allowable vacuum modulations or vacuum fluctuations in the vacuum metric. And so this could be imagined that if you could control the vacuum metric, if you control those modes that are allowed and not allowed, you can very temporarily and almost instantaneously shape the space-time around you so that you're pushed somewhere else very quickly. And so this is certainly another candidate and would fit the profile of a craft that is very rapidly moving from one space to another without, for instance, disturbing the air. There's another notion called quantum entanglement, where you're transmitting instantaneously from one spot to another quantum information. So for instance, Eric Davis did these drawings in the middle and lower right to describe the difference between a regular fax machine and a quantum entanglement fax machine. The quantum entanglement reads your quantum states as it's destroying your body. It maintains that information, and with its quantum entangled partner, will 3D print those quantum states at the quantum level right back out to wherever the receiving station is. And that is, in a sense, teleportation. You're transmitting instantaneously through quantum entanglement all the data in your body. And so this is certainly one potential way that a teleporter could work, and was featured in Business Insider. When I make these slides available, you'll be able to use these live links in the slide presentation. Another way, and there's very little empirical evidence for extra dimensions, but I wanted to mention this because there have been a number of papers in the past talking about hyperspace. Is there a way to shift to extra dimensions and go into or out of those extra dimensions? Certainly 5D Clues-Klein, like my associate Detlef Hoyer has described, would be one way to leverage extra dimensions to travel through space-time, because we're using those extra dimensions to alter our space-time metric in our dimension. And so there have been a number of attempts at this. Green did them, Randall and Sundstrom, and I can make these references available when I publish the companion paper. And so why do we think this will work? Because we have actually already observed it. And I heard yesterday a presenter say we don't have any evidence for interdimensional beings. That's not completely true. We have run across one race that has the capability of interdimensional travel and interdimensional manipulation, and that's us. Us human beings have been witnessed to have psychic and telekinetic teleportation abilities, granted in a very, very tiny sliver of the population, but it really defies prosaic explanation. What we've seen in published reports from Russia, and especially from PRC China, is that they're very scientific controlled experiments where we have two different boxes, an object's placed in one box, both boxes are sealed, both boxes are subjected to high-speed cameras, and the object disappears from one box and reappears in the other box, a physical object. Sometimes it disappears and is gone for a few seconds, just completely gone, and then appears in the other box. Sometimes, depending upon the test subject, it starts looking like it's dissolving and becoming translucent, and then slowly reintegrates in the other box. We have no idea how this works, but obviously people have the ability to do this. So that's been pretty fascinating. These are not exactly open source articles. These are articles that were published in foreign language journals that were translated by Defense Intelligence Agency. So the chain of custody here on these references are, as they were published in their own native tongue, they were found material by DIA, translated by Defense Intelligence Agency, wound up in the hands of Eric Davis. Eric Davis published most of these in a comparative paper he did on telekinetic teleportation about 20 years ago now. So this has been out for about 20 years, but because it's taboo, or has been taboo until universal love took over, this hasn't been talked about a lot. So I wanted to, this is the last version I have. This is the last kind of teleportation I have because it's the least understood, certainly by me. But I wanted to include it for completeness. There is a new emerging field called neuroquantology. It's not ripe yet. A lot of the papers don't have the kind of academic backing you would expect from scientific papers. But I also wanted to mention it because it's worth paying attention to. It's not worth ignoring, and we should continue to track this activity. So that's it in a nutshell, a variety of classical and quantum approaches to gravitational field propulsion. We're looking, the next step of this is to quantify exactly what kind of signatures come out of each type of these gravitational propulsion techniques so that we can try to compare our experiences and the data that the sensors are picking up with these kinds of propulsion techniques to try to glean any more information we can out of these encounters. So that's the next steps. Thank you for your time.
Excellent overview there, Gary Stephenson. Thank you very much. Yeah, I'll take that.